Hello, everyone. I'm Anumani, the author of Unmasking Your Soul, a transformational journey of truth, light, and healing. And today I have a wonderful guest, Annmarie Kelly. Hi, Annmarie. How are you?
Hi, Annumani, and hello to all of your viewers.
Thank you. And before we get started, I'm going to read Annmarie's bio, and then we're going to get into the questions. So Annmarie Kelly has been married 6 times. I'm sure people are going to want to know about that. Each marriage was for just 5 years, and each time it was to the same man.
It's true.
During these marriages, the mother of modern marriage built a successful business, Skill Builder Systems, and founded the Victorious Woman Project and its annual fundraiser for women, the Girlfriend Gala. She also became an award-winning leader, author, women's empowerment speaker, and the host of the popular weekly radio show, The Friday Happy Hour, I was honored to be a guest of yours.
We had fun that day, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We had lots of fun. And we got to do a little soul reading for Annmarie. Annmarie is the author of 3 empowerment books for women: Victorious Woman, Shaping Life's Challenges into Personal Victories and Victory by Design, the Midlife Women's Reinvention Guide, and just published The 5-Year Marriage, Shifting the Marriage Paradigm. Annmarie waited a long time to bring the 5-year marriage to women and couples who want to shift the marriage paradigm in their favor. She's excited to finally share it with the world.
I am. I'm really jazzed about it.
That's so wonderful. Do you have a copy there, Annmarie?
I actually do.
We'll show our audience. There you go, the 5-year marriage. I love that. And we're going to get more into that in a moment. I always like to start our audience off with the same question, asking my guests what their experience of soul is, what your definition of soul would be. So let's start with that, of your experience with your own soul.
I think it was when I was interviewing so many women for my first book, Victorious Woman, that I started to realize that the thing that most people, and people would ask me all the time, what's the thing that you would tell women is the most important thing that they do? And it's to be who you really are. And I think that as I've matured and gotten older, I've realized that really is the thing. It's being that your soul is who you really are. It's the essence of who you are. You know, it's that stuff that, you know, you're always talking about unmasking. It's, you know, we put so many masks on that cover up who we really are. So I think when you get right down to it, your soul is who you really are at the core of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And that's absolutely what we're going to be talking about, is getting to who you are, right? You always weren't who you are now. And so we want to hear about how you got to this place, right, where you wrote these books, and you obviously had many experiences along the way. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey of unmasking and the masks that you were wearing? Perhaps there was one in particular that you really felt during your life. Tell the audience about, you know, the things that you experienced that got to where you are today.
Well, you know, Anumani, I call myself a recovering good girl because I think that's how I spent most of my life, and even now, you know, like I'm still in recovery, but I'm not completely over it. So I think that good girl mask was the really big one for me, and it started to come off when I was in my 20s, and I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. So I knew from early that I was supposed to go to school, get married, have children, you know, I call it the pre-program. You know, you go to school, you have it, you get married, you buy a house, you have more kids, you buy a bigger house, you know, and then by about 45, you're done. And that was the direction I was going in. And I got engaged when I was 22. And something happened one night when we were on a double date, and my girlfriend called me the next day, and she said, you know, Jimmy was telling Joe that he was saying some things that Joe didn't, and that was her fiance, didn't think that was quite marriage minded. So I was going to blow it off. I was just going to say, she tends to be over, a little dramatic and whatever, but I didn't. And I called up Jimmy and I said, we need to talk about something. And I really was hoping that night that all would go well, and he would say, oh, that I didn't mean whatever that was. But he didn't. When we went out for something to eat, and I said, this is what happened. And he said, and I said, that doesn't sound like he didn't think you were very marriage minded, and it really doesn't sound like you are. So what's the story? And it turns out that he really wasn't. I think that he would have gone ahead and got married because that was the direction we were going in if I hadn't brought it up. But happily, I did bring it up. It wasn't easy at that time. That was like the first thing. But here was the big unmasking at that point in my life. It wasn't breaking my engagement. It was when I went home and I talked to my parents, and I went, I was crying. We were both crying in my driveway. I gave them back the ring. We were both crying. And then I went inside and told my parents, and my father went ballistic. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this happened in the whole 20th century, but my father was interested in filing a, when you break your engagement?
Oh, when you break your engagement?
A breach of promise. Oh, he was going to sue the guy I was engaged to for a breach of promise. I really don't think that happened in all of the 20th century, but it almost happened with me. And I remember running up the stairs to my bedroom, throwing myself on the bed, and I was hysterical crying. It took me, because I thought my father's angry with me. I think it was after that I thought, first of all, my father didn't even realize that it was me who broke the engagement. So if he was going to sue anybody, it would have been his own daughter. But that was just part of it. The other part of it was that my father loved me, and I know he did. And I realized at that point that if my father, who really loved me, could not get past that Italian Catholic agenda of married and children to know what was best for me, there was never going to be another living person who was going to know what was good for me as much as I would know. And that was really, Anumani, that was really the beginning, because up until then, I just did whatever anybody told me. I was a good kid. I did all the right thing. Well, I got in a little trouble, but mostly I was on the path. And right. After that, all that good girl stuff stopped at that point. Not all the good girl stuff, most of the good girl stuff. I was on a path. And you know how it is when you're making that shift. It's not easy, and then people aren't always happy that you're doing it.
Yeah. And I can completely resonate with that story, because I also was raised Catholic in a Puerto Rican family. And I remember my cousins would say to me, I was in my early 30s, like, when are you getting married and having kids? So there was a part of me.
Oh, yeah, because if you were in your 30s, yes. Oh, my goodness.
It's like, oh, my God, what's wrong with you,
I know, you were really off the reservation.
and feeling that good girl also within me that I need, like, yeah, what was wrong with me? I had to get married and, have kids. So I think that good girl mask happens to a lot of women who are impacted by their upbringing, who feel that they need to be that good girl and listen to their parents and everyone else around them. And we really do have to learn to listen more to our own hearts and go within, right? Sure. And not live from the outside world, but really live from the inside world. So this is a really important, I think, theme for a lot of people, that they end up, choosing or making decisions for other people versus for themselves. So what happened after, this breakup engagement, and you started on this new path of recognizing that you needed to change some things in your life?
Yeah, right after that, and for a couple years, because Annmarie, the process doesn't happen like that. It
Yes.
takes time.
Yes.
And sometimes I think maybe that's why a lot of people don't do it, because it's not an easy time. It takes time, and it's not an easy time. Doesn't mean everything's bad, but it's just not an easy time, especially when, when everybody wants you to be who you have been, even though who you have been. It's in Victoria's Woman, I told the story of a woman who had cancer, and I used to do Reiki for her, and she was in her early 60s, and she decided not to have treatment. And the reason was because she wanted to open a bridal salon, and nobody, not her spouse, not her kids, not her friends, would support that. Yeah, her spouse wouldn't even talk about it. Her kids would just say, "Oh, Mom, you've raised us all these years, and now you should just relax and have a good time." And her friends said, "Well, you're just having a midlife crisis." Nobody understood that was like her soul. That's what she wanted. And she made bridal gowns. So it wasn't like this was foreign.
Yeah.
She was already good at that. So I think a lot of times it just happens that, we just, so in my case, that was her case. And she ended up, I saw her up until the day before she died. But when I went to the ceremony, the church, the mass, I thought, wow, all of these people are the people for whom she didn't want to change, that loved her so much. And as I was saying it then very dramatically in the back of the church, loved her to death because she wouldn't change for them.
Yeah.
So that's always a hard. So I went into that valley for a couple of years. And when I came out, it was different for me, because I realized that I knew better for me than anybody else. And the hard part was learning how to make those decisions and taking those steps of making those decisions, and sometimes falling down and then having to pick myself up. One of the really good things in that period, I moved out of my parents' house, which was such a big deal. My father didn't talk to me for a year. And, I knew I was out there on my own, because I couldn't go back and say, I don't have money, or, whatever, because I don't know what they would say. I think that they were all hoping I would move back, but there was nothing that was going to, I just was determined I was not. And so, I went through that time of not having money and, that kind of stuff. But I felt so strongly that I needed to be who I really was, or at least finding who I really was. And I think in the beginning, that is, you have to figure out, since you've been being somebody else all these years, now you have to figure out who you really are.
Yes, that's a really good point. So how did your relationship with your parents change after that?
It was interesting. My father eventually, he didn't talk to me for a year. It was like around Christmas time. The following Christmas, I just started talking to him. And I think at that point, he figured out that I had done it for a year. And when he was in the hospital dying, I said something about him, something to him, and he told me how proud he was of me. And that was a really big deal, because he died not too long after that. With my mother, it just shifted. She got older, I wasn't coming home. I think that they finally accepted that. So, that was how it ended up being. That I remember one time when my father was sick, I stayed with my mother for about a week, and I was out with my friends one night and got home around midnight. And and I wasn't a kid at that point. I was in my 20s. And my mother looked at me and she said, "Do you see what time it is?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Mom." So, and like the first time that happened a couple of times. And then finally I said, "Hey, Mom, I didn't get the check." She said, "The check?" I said, "Yeah, the check." She said, "Annmarie, what are you talking about?" I said, "The check that you send me every month that helps me to pay my bills, that allows you to comment on my lifestyle." And she didn't quite get it that first time. So the next time I said it was the last time I said it, because at that point she really did get it. And I think that really was me standing up for who I was. I was paying my bills. I was managing with, I was teaching Catholic school at the time. So I was getting like 2 holy cards a week. And, having trouble with the bank calculators. So, it was, I became a vegetarian because I could eat soybeans and I could eat eggs and I could, cheese and bread. So that was a large part of my diet because I couldn't afford to buy meat, sometimes chicken. It was a good week, like right after I got paid.
Yeah.
I was doing it. And the thing, and so I didn't want anybody telling me anything at that point. I made mistakes. I fell down. And when I picked myself up, the one big thing I learned during that time was I will always be able to take care of myself. Even if I have to, well, I didn't have to scrub floors, but I did, like there were times when I had 2 or 3 jobs. I know how to take care of myself. And I think for women to have that confidence, to know that no matter what happens, I can take care of myself, I think that's a really big deal.
That is a big deal.
That's a piece of empowerment, Anumani, that when you give yourself that gift, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, agreed. So how did you, let's fast forward into you're doing all this amazing work, and how did the Victorious Woman Project begin and your work in that area?
Victorious Woman started a little bit was I didn't get a college degree until 15 years ago. And it was about 18 years ago when I decided, it was because I already had a successful business, but it was sort of getting in my way when I went out to speak. And it seemed like always people said, well, what school did you go to? So I went back I chose a program that fit in with my pocketbook and my lifestyle at now Newman University. And the very first class I took, sometimes, Anumani, we never know where things are going to take us. My very first class, we had to write a paper every week, which, while you're doing like a full-time job and you're writing a paper every week, a research paper. Interesting. But at one point, that instructor said to me, you really have a talent for writing. And I had done some writing professionally, like for, my professional association newsletters and things like that. But she said, you really have a talent. And that sort of put a bug in my head. But it was about 6 months after I graduated, it was 9/11. And, a lot of business dried up at that point. For, people weren't traveling and things. So I used to go to bed at night and say, God, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And you know how we do that? We say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then you get a message, and that's what happened for me. I got this message that said that the whole Victorious Woman book, everything came as in a capsule. One morning as I was, in that twilight sleep, just as I was waking up. And so I did, so that's that first morning, I got that inspiration and thought, no, that's not what I do women. But I was still going to bed at night and saying, God, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And the very next month, the exact same thing happened. It was in that twilight time that said, write this book. It was just a capsule idea. The whole thing came together in a little capsule. And that time I thought about it from the time I got out of bed till I got to the bathroom. And I was like, I don't do women. I do corporate training and development. That's what I do. And then I started to have a medical problem, and I was seeing the gynecologist, and they started ruling out, it's not STDs, it's not this. And they finally ruled out the cancers, except for the big one. And I remember thinking that started around Thanksgiving, and this was probably the middle of January. And thinking, listen, if it's that, I just don't think, and I thought the woman I spoke about earlier, I thought, maybe I'll just do what she did. I'll just decide not to have treatment and I'll just leave. That's just the way it'll happen. And then I was sad about that. So I had myself a little pity party. And then, then the other side of me kicked in and said, but surely there must be other women who have gone through this. And maybe I could just talk to them, which was the whole idea behind Victorious Woman. And Anumani, it was like I could almost hear the universe be hysterical laughing and saying, we tried to tell you nice a couple times and you weren't listening. So we had to give you the 2x4 between the eyes. And from that moment, within 2 weeks, my situation cleared itself up. And within 6 weeks from that moment, I did my first interview for Victorious Woman.
What a marvelous story. You know, when we resist the messages and the essence of our soul, you were talking about who we are, you know, things happen. Many times it happens in our body because it's trying to get our attention to say, hey, remember this? Remember that message we gave you? So yeah, I think a lot of us go through that. I've experienced that many times, that then we finally get it. Oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Because sometimes it's really good if you figure yourself out first before you get the health crisis that
right.
You're like, oh yeah.
That's right. So you then interviewed these women and created this book. And how did the concept then, is that when you created your radio show, or?
The radio show is a little over 4 years old. So we're going on 5 years. But no, the radio show didn't start. The Victorious Woman came out in 2005. Victory by Design, which is a companion to Victorious Woman. A lot of people, I was doing a lot of workshops around Victorious Woman from 2005 on, and women's empowerment workshops, and it was kind of the same thing. People, you know, the women I was talking to seemed to all be stuck in the same place or not know how to get started the same way. So that's where Victory by Design came from, in helping women to figure out, you know, it starts out with values before vision. A lot of women, I'm so surprised, aren't really clear about their values. So when they're trying to make decisions, they're not always making them in their best interest because they're going along some other value system, and then things don't work out, and they're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted, or things fall apart. So, you know, thinking of your values and setting your goals and things.
So that's a good place maybe to give a place where women can start. You know, you spoke to all these women, you did a whole bunch of workshops. What was the most common theme that you heard or experienced with these women?
The most common thing then, and even now, there's a little bit of a shift in midlife, but even then, it was, I know what I don't want. I don't know what I do want. So going through that whole thing, and you know, that again, that goes back to the values. It's like, well, no, I don't want this and this, but they, in not being clear with their values, you know, somebody who would say, well, I want to be independent, and at the same time, spending a lot of time trying to a boyfriend or a partner, and those two sometimes don't fit together well. If you're trying to be independent and then leaning on a boyfriend, this can be, not always, but I think you have to get independent first, and then you attract a different kind of man into your life when you're already in that independent stage, versus when you're needy, you're attracting the man who resonates to that neediness.
So if for our audience who's watching and listening now or on the replay, what would be the first step for someone who maybe is in that place where, you know they want to change their life, they don't really know exactly what they want or how to do it? Where should they start? What would be the first step?
Well, I would start with the values and come up with your top 5 values. You know, you could have 25 of them, but what are your 5 most important ones? Do you put, you know, is God at the top of the list? Is independence at the top of the list? Is health at the top of the list? And how your values are today could be shifting as you move into midlife to you know, getting older. Those values, like my good example is when I was 25, I never would have put health in the top 5 because I had good health.
Yeah.
You know, by 40 or 50, you're thinking, oh, health is really important because if you don't have that, the other stuff doesn't matter, doesn't happen as well. So what do you value? And then start thinking, what can I be doing that honors those values? So if health is in that top 5, what things do I need to change in my life to create better health in my life? If it's being more independent or being more empowered, what things do I need to do differently to be more empowered, or how am I not being empowered now? One of the big things that I think is really important for women is to know your boundaries. And to me, that was always, I had no boundaries before. And even as I started to make those changes, my boundaries were weak. And at some point in my second marriage, Joseph and I went to a therapist, and the therapist gave me an assignment. They always give you like assignments to do. And he gave me this one assignment, and when we went back for the next meeting, he said, well, Annmarie, how did you do with this? And I said, oh, I failed miserably. And I did, and I had. And he said, Annmarie, you have terrible boundaries. And it was really, he didn't have to tell me twice. I understood. So then I started to say, what really is unacceptable to me? That makes it, that starts to create a frame. When you have your boundaries, like it's like a frame to values, and boundaries are frames. And one of the things that I realized growing up in my Italian Catholic family was a lot of loud voices, a lot of loud stuff. And I realized that when people yelled at me, that shifted me into good girl mode. So one of my boundaries is no one is allowed to yell at me. No one. And there was, in my old neighborhood, there was a man who thought he owned the neighborhood. And when you would drive past his house, it was a row house, so we had the common drive in the back. And as you would drive down there, if you didn't go the speed he thought you should be going, he would yell at you. And one day, Joseph and I were going someplace, and we drove. He put little speed bumps on either side of his house, and we'd have to slow down. He was really obnoxious. And one day, I just had it. And Joseph and I were going someplace. I threw my car into park. I got out of the car, and yelling at me like a crazy person. And all I kept saying to him was, you are not allowed to yell at me. You are not to yell at me ever again. And I just kept repeating that over and over and over until he had yelled himself out. And then he stopped yelling and heard what I said. And he was flabbergasted because he just didn't know what to do with that. I wasn't yelling at him. You are not to yell at me again. And you know what? He never did. It was interesting. It was just, and I just don't allow that in my life. I'm an adult woman. I've worked really hard in my life. I've overcome a lot of stuff. Nobody should be yelling at me for anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very powerful. I think for women especially, important to recognize what your boundaries are. And I think a lot of us aren't taught that and believe that, we need to please everyone. And so in doing that pleasing, we're allowing others to overstep boundaries that aren't healthy. So that's a really important point.
Yeah, I think so. And, and then when somebody would yell at me, sometimes I would try to make excuses for them. I'm an adult woman. There are no excuses for somebody yelling at me. You know what I mean? And I have to remember that not all the time, but people don't yell at me. But you know what? Here's something interesting. That I have that boundary has put me in a position people don't yell at me. And I think it's because I was able to step up inside of myself
Yes.
My thinking changed. And when somebody looks like they're getting close to stepping out of line in my against me, I think I step it up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think there's something energetically that happens when we own a part of ourselves in that way, that then the outside world feels that, because energetically you're saying to them like, hey, you can't overstep this boundary. So it's powerful, because then you see it in your outside world.
And figuring out your boundaries, that was another thing. I don't think that's easy to do, because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. For me, I was being such a good girl, and we're not schooled in how to speak up or speak out. Yeah. I think younger women might be. I think they're a little bit better at it than the women who grew up in my time frame did. Yeah. I think if you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s, I don't think that you were taught to speak up and speak out the way I think younger women at least have a little bit more of an edge in doing that.
So let's talk about your 5-year marriage, because I'm sure everyone's like curious about all of this. So tell us about what inspired you to write this book. And it is a different way of thinking, a new paradigm for couples. So tell us about that.
Well, after all the stuff, as I just told you, all the stuff that I did to get independent, I wasn't about ready to give that up. And it's not that I didn't want love, or it's not that I didn't want somebody in my life, or didn't want to be married, but I just wasn't going to give it up. I wasn't giving up all that independent spirit, which maybe I had it all along and just didn't know. But I had worked really hard and I wasn't giving it up. And then I met Joseph, and he wanted to get married. And the first time he asked me, I didn't even answer the question. The first time he asked me, I said, we should buy a house. Because I had a real estate license by that point. I knew how to get into one. I especially was interested in the fact that I knew how to get out of it. So I thought, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just sell the house and split the profits, and that's that. So that's what we did. We spent about 6 months looking for a house. We bought one. We moved in September of that year, and 1987. And then the following year in July, when I was thinking about his birthday, his August birthday coming up, I said, Joseph, what do you want for your birthday? He said, I want to get married. And all I could think was, snookers. How could that be? We're living together. Isn't that enough? He still wants to get married? And I said, I really just don't know what. I said, I have to think about it. And so I did. For a couple of weeks. I took long walks. I prayed and I meditated, and I tried to figure out what to make of this. How could I do this without compromising myself? And finally, one day it came to me, we could just get married for a short time. So I said that to Joseph. I said, we need to talk. And I know we thought we were going to break up at that point. But I said, look, here's the thing. And I explained everything to him. And I said, if we could get married for 5 years, and then if we still like each other at the end of 5 years, we'll get married again. If we could do marriage that way, I can do that. And so that's what happened. We got married in September of 1988. And then we got married in 1993 and 1998. So, and it's not just, some people think it's a matter of renewing your vows. It's not a renewal of vows. Because here's the thing, and this is what we have realized. We didn't realize it at the beginning, but we realized it after our second marriage. So much changes in your life over 5 years. 1 year, you don't notice the difference so much. Even 2 years, you don't notice the difference so much. But over 5 years, enough happens. You might change careers. You might lose a job. You could have kids. There's so many things that could happen. And those things change you. So if you're still thinking that you have the same agreements 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road that you had on your first wedding day, that's impossible. You can't be living by the same agreements 5 and 10 and 15 years later. So what we learned, and we went to therapy in our second marriage, and what we learned then, some of the psychologist gave us some exercises to do, and then, it's like the curse of being in teaching and training and development. You have to make a program out. So we started having what we started calling the family meetings. And the family meetings where we sit down and we say, okay, what's been going right? And we touch base with each other on a regular basis. In the beginning, we did it every week, every other week. And now we do it a couple times a year. But when it's at the end of our marriage, we sit down a little bit and really rethink how that 5 years went. What are we thinking about differently? And if we decide to get married again, what do we want the next 5 years to look like for us together? Because as Joseph likes to say, it isn't just the marriage, but it's me, him, and the marriage. There's 3 parts. A lot of people think there's just 2 parts, the couple, but it isn't, because if you continue to be an independent person, or a person who knows your own self, that soul part of yourself, it's you and your partner, and then there's that entity where you come together and make that partnership together. So the last time, traditionally speaking, would have been 25 years, but usually we start in June for September. But this time, that last time, we started in February, because by then, both of our mothers had passed away, and we had been the primary caregivers for both. Things had changed in our businesses, and we were getting older. We didn't have forever in front of us like we did in 1988. So we needed to really think about where we were going and what we were doing that would be different from the previous marriage or the previous marriages. So that's how it all came about. And then I actually wrote the first draft of this book, The 5-Year Marriage, in 1993. I couldn't get a publisher to buy it. And it probably was really good because I didn't have enough marriage experience at that point, to really understand what happens in a marriage over a long time. So that's how it came about. And then in people, if you Google the 5-year marriage now, a lot of people have been talking about contract marriages. I talked to somebody about 2 weeks ago, Anumani, who she's been married, that between 10 and 15 year time seems to be an interesting time in a marriage for a lot of younger women, or not necessarily younger, but all the ones I've been talking to have been younger than me anyway. And she said her kids were in school, so she was an empty nester, and she had maintained she had a small part-time business. She was still doing that, but then she got a full-time job. And she said her spouse was still expecting the food on the table and the laundry, and she said, I had to say to him, I don't have the kind of time I had before. And she was angry because he wasn't really getting it. So she was still doing all the stuff she did when she was a stay-at-home mom with a part-time job. That's when you need to sit down and really rethink what your agreements are. So anyway, I wrote the first book in 1993, and over these last 6 or 7 years, a lot of things have been coming out. Things like Mexico thinking that they want to have 2-year marriage on license because of the number of divorces, and the divorce rate has not escalated recently, not because fewer people are getting divorces as much as because fewer people are getting married. There isn't the stigma of living together or having children out of wedlock. So more couples are choosing to do that, and we'll see how it goes.
So when you do your 5-year agreements, are you actually writing those agreements down, or what's the
We do. I have that training, that training thing. I do charts. I do take it a little bit more than anybody actually needs to, but I sort of can't help myself. But we actually do come to agreement and say, here's what we're going over the next 5 years. And the 5 years during which our mothers were sick, anything we had actually planned didn't move in the direction that we wanted, because every weekend we were doing something for one mother or the other. So it's not like there's no space for a deviation. If you have a child who gets sick, in our case, it was mothers who needed care. And in that 5-year period, they both started to need care. And then during that time, one mother went into a nursing home, the other mother just needed more care, and they both passed away. So that made a big difference. We went back in 2013, we went back and looked at the stuff we had said in 2008 and said, what still is important to us to do? And we brought those into the next marriage.
And do you do any type of ritual around every time you do?
Oh, yeah, we get married.
Okay, you get married.
It's a new marriage. Mm-hmm. And so we get married again. We've been married. Our first wedding was in a backyard. None of my weddings have been big. The first wedding was in a backyard in Westchester, Pennsylvania. The second one, we lived in a house that backed up to a cemetery, and they had a chapel that was a replica of a chapel in Williamsburg, Virginia, and that's where we took our first vacation. So we got married in the chapel in the cemetery. And then when it came to the third marriage, we just moved, and we just didn't have time to think about it. So I had tickets to go see Conan O'Brien. So I called that marriage the Conan O'Brien blessing. The next marriage was after the priest who I graduated college, and the priest who did my baccalaureate mass used to do a mass every day at Newman University for the nuns. So we got married. He did fabulous. It's Joseph's favorite wedding, because he did, in a half hour, he did the mass, sermon, had a special blessing, and did a beautiful prayer, St. Francis, that was customized to us. And the nuns were all there putting their hands out. It was really very nice. Our last wedding was we got married one year at one wedding was at just the two of us at Valley Forge Chapel. And didn't start out that way, but it ended up being that way. And then the last time we got married at the Tyler Arboretum, and one of the minister was one of the women I met and featured in my first book, Victorious Woman. And her reinvention, she became a wedding celebrant. She did our wedding that year at the Tyler Arboretum in Media.
That's wonderful. So when's the next?
And a new dress on money, and you get to get a new dress every time. Sometimes jewelry. There are some real benefits to this.
So when's the next date for the 5-year? What year?
But it's this year. Our marriage is ending in a couple of months. So, it'll end in September, and then so in the summertime we'll start deciding whether we're going to go again or how things go. And if we decide to go again, if we are going to go again, then how are we going to do it? What's going to be our plan for that 5 years?
Oh, that's wonderful. And what a journey that you've been on. Yeah, looking forward to seeing more of how that 5-year your book and the impact as you begin to help people in their relationships, which for all of us, I've gone through a divorce myself. There's so much importance needed around developing relationships in a way that really is healthy. So thank you for sharing that and for listening to the guidance to create that.
Yeah, thank you. It's I really, I really feel like I really feel blessed about it because it seems to be, it's been an interesting experience doing it this way. And as I've been sharing it with people 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I shared it with people, everybody thought it was a big joke. And then, of course, you had the guys that were like, oh, I could be married to this woman and this woman. That's really not the point. The point really is not to rack up multiple partners,
Right.
to really create a relationship where you do have a partner. And you know what, Anumani, I think the whole reason for marriage, I think, is that to create a level of intimacy that you really can't have with anybody else. And too often in marriages that you just start having friction and you don't get to that point. But if you create a relationship that is a partnership, and that your partner's not perfect, you're not perfect, things aren't going to, like, life's going to intervene, things are going to happen. If you look at it as a partnership instead of, okay, I'm stuck with this person till I'm dead.
Yeah.
I think, when you think you're stuck with this person till I'm dead, resentment builds up and you get angry. But if you say, well, this is a partnership, this part of the partnership isn't going so well, let's see how we can make it be different so that it honors both of us. I think that gives you that intimacy because you really have trust for that person that you're with.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. So what invitation would you like to make to our audience to connect with you? How can they connect with you? Is there a special invitation that you have for those watching?
Something that I would like to offer all of you who are watching is if you can go to 5yearmarriage.com and sign up for my mailing list, and I'll keep you posted as I start doing workshops and retreats, seminars. So if you want to know how that happens, and if you're interested in the 5-year marriage and in those communication skills, I can't help myself. It's that training, that teacher training thing. It's like I have to do that because I really would like everybody to know how important all of that is and how to do it. And right now it's at victoriouswoman.com. I have you can download a white paper that is the avoid at all cost behaviors. So if you're seeing somebody and you're thinking, well, I don't know, is he the one? Is she the one? Take a look at these behaviors because there's 4 of them that if this partner has any of those behaviors, you want to walk the other way. So if you go on, you can download that paper, and there's a link to get the book on Amazon. You can get the book on Amazon.com. So that's available to anybody that's watching now. There's a blog post at victoriouswoman.com just for you.
And the 5-year marriage, is that on Amazon as well?
Yep, here. Let me show. It is on Amazon, and it is in paperback, and it is in Kindle format, so you can download it.
Okay, great. So I will put all of those links underneath the video once we're done here. Any last words of advice for our audience, Annmarie, before we close the show?
Oh, you know what? I guess I would tell. It's what I like to tell people: be who you really are, and live the life you'll love living. Because I remember my mother. My mother was 90 when she died, and I remember being in the hospital with her one time, and we were talking. I said, "Oh," they were saying, you don't look like you're a day over 80." And I said, "Oh, how about like 90 years?" I said, "Yeah." My mother was not a philosophical woman, but she just got very wistful, and she said, "And it went so fast." And it kind of, at that moment, I had to actually be present with her. But when I came home that night, I was saying to Joseph, he said, "Oh my God, 90 years and it went so fast." It kind of freaked me out. I think it's that making the most of your day, making the most of your life, doing what you love, and not having a lot of those regrets.
Yeah, that's that's a wonderful to really be present to the life that you're living, so that, I think it was Wayne Dyer who would say, don't live with your music, don't die with your music still inside of you.
Yes, yes.
And we forget about that.
And Annmarie, on the radio show, as you know, I mean, you have reinvented yourself, and that's mostly what I do on the Friday Happy Hour. I interview women who have done, most of the time, almost always they're women, and most of the time they're women who have reinvented their lives. Maybe they left their job, or they got a divorce, or something happened, and then they started to build themselves up, and they're living lives that they love. Not that they hated the life that they had before, but now they're really loving what they're doing. And they're in their 50s. I had a woman who wrote her first book in her 70s. It's like, I just don't think it's too late at any point in time.
Agreed.
Or too early.
No, never too late, never too early. So thank you, Annmarie. It's been wonderful being here with you today.
Thank you, Annmarie. This was great. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And I just want to remind our audience that you are loved and you are loved. And I'll be back with you next week on Monday. Take care, Annmarie.
Bye. You too, Annmarie. To all your viewers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.